Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 on this, the 20th of September. I'm Douglas MacKenzie with a slightly late programme and also a somewhat curtailed programme this evening as we have no guest in the studio. However, we have a full raft of stories pertaining to and affecting Scotland, which I hope will stimulate discussion wherever you are. We begin as always with the Ukraine update on this day 940 since Russia's full-scale invasion of the country. Ukraine's offensive into the Russian border region of Kursk diverted about 40,000 Russian troops away from the front line, President Zelensky said on Thursday. Kyiv launched its Kursk offensive on 6 August in a bid to pull Moscow's forces away from eastern Ukraine, where the Russian army has captured a string of villages in recent months. Russia's defense ministry said its forces had captured the village of Hayarivka, east of the city of Kurakovo, in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region. The General Staff of Ukraine's military, in an afternoon report, referred to the village as one of several engulfed by fighting. Russian forces hit a geriatric care home in the Ukrainian city of Sumy and targeted its energy sector in a new wave of airstrikes on Thursday, killing at least one civilian, Ukrainian officials said. During a daytime strike on the northern city, a Russian-guided bomb hit a 5-story building, regional and military officials said. One person was killed and 12 wounded, the Interior Ministry said. The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine said attacks on the power grid probably violated humanitarian law, while the International Energy Agency said in a report that Ukraine's electricity supply shortfall in the critical winter months could reach about a third of expected peak demand. Moscow has repeatedly attacked the Sumy region, which borders Russia's Kursk region, the site of a major Ukrainian incursion in which Kyiv says it seized over 100 settlements. President Zelensky will meet President Biden and Kamala Harris at the White House next week in what is likely to be his last such visit before US elections. Zelensky is expected to share a victory plan with the US leaders to end the war with Russia during the visit on 26 September, as Kyiv threats that a second Donald Trump presidency could loosen US commitment to Ukraine. In a separate announcement, Zelensky said he would also meet Trump. The US imposed sanctions on Thursday on a network of 5 groups and 1 person for enabling payments between Russia and North Korea to support Moscow's war in Ukraine and Pyongyang's weapons program, the Treasury Department said. Germany is set to approve close to €400 million in additional military aid to Ukraine, according to the Finance Ministry. The funds are in addition to about €8 billion budgeted for Ukraine in 2024. On Thursday, the trial of an 18-year-old girl who stuck a 19th century Ukrainian poem on a statue to protest Moscow's offensive in Ukraine opened in Russia. Daria Kozyreva faces up to 5 years in prison. She was arrested in February for posting a verse from a poem by Ukraine's national poet Taras Shevchenko on a statue of him in St. Petersburg. President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that Russia was ramping up drone production by around 10 times to nearly 1.4 million this year to ensure victory in Ukraine. Now the latest from Israel and Gaza. At least 41,272 people have been killed and 95,551 wounded in Gaza since October 7th, according to a Gaza Health Ministry statement. The leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, threatened Israel with tough retribution and just punishment after the unprecedented wave of attacks that targeted the organization this week. In a televised speech on Thursday, Nasrallah admitted the attacks had been a major blow and threatened retribution against Israel, where it expects it and where it does not. Israel will face a crushing response from the Axis of Resistance, Iran's Revolutionary Guards commander Hossein Salami told Nasrallah, state media reported. In his speech, Nasrallah vowed to continue the conflict with Israel until a ceasefire in Gaza was reached. Israeli jets roared over Beirut late on Thursday as Israeli warplanes carried out dozens of strikes across southern Lebanon in some of the most intense bombing since the start of the war in October. The Israel Defense Forces said its fighter jets struck more than 100 Hezbollah rocket launchers in southern Lebanon in the space of a few hours. 8 people were reported to have been injured by anti-tank missiles fired by Hezbollah into northern Israel, and 2 were hurt in a drone attack. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said Israeli military operations will continue, adding that there are significant opportunities but also heavy risks as the country enters a, quote, new phase of the war. Senior diplomats from the US, UK, Germany, France and Italy met on Thursday in Paris before a UN Security Council meeting planned for today as tensions in the Middle East spiraled. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken urged against escalatory actions by any party in the Middle East and called for restraint, while France's Foreign Minister Stéphane Séjourné said France and the US were very worried about the situation in the Middle East. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy called for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. Explosions in booby-trapped radios and pagers in Lebanon seriously disrupted the country's fragile health sector, the head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said. The communications devices that exploded in Lebanon were implanted with explosives before arriving into the country, according to a preliminary investigation by Lebanese authorities. Lebanese authorities determined that the devices were detonated by sending electronic messages to the devices, according to a letter sent by the Lebanese mission to the UN Security Council. UN children's rights experts have accused Israel of severe breaches of a global treaty protecting children's rights, saying its military actions in Gaza had catastrophic consequences on children in the Palestinian territory. Gal Hirsch, a senior Israeli advisor, has presented a new proposed ceasefire deal with Hamas to the Biden administration, according to reports. The proposal would see a permanent end to the conflict in Gaza, the release in one stage of all hostages held there in exchange for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel, and the safe passage for Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar to be exiled out of Gaza, according to reports. UK news now. Downing Street fears it is to be asked to support the issue of an International Criminal Court (ICC) arrest warrant for the Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu. Number 10 is said to have been concerned for more than a week about an imminent statement from the ICC that its pre-trial chamber judges have accepted the request of the ICC prosecutor Karim Khan to issue arrest warrants for war crimes committed in Gaza. The request for arrest warrants was issued on the 20th of May against Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, as well as 3 Hamas leaders, including Yahya Sinwar and Ismail Haniyeh, the now deceased head of the Hamas political bureau. In the short term, Number 10 is said to be most concerned by the explosive political fallout if the ICC issues an arrest warrant for Netanyahu, especially at such a moment of extreme tension in the Middle East. Khan told the ICC pre-trial chamber the issue of the arrest warrant was of the utmost urgency nearly a month ago. The Chamber of Judges has taken much longer to reach a decision than the 3 weeks it required to accept Khan's request for an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, the Russian leader, over his role in orchestrating the abduction of children from Ukraine. The delay has been caused by judges needing to assess numerous amicus curiae observations from states, international organizations, victim representatives, and human rights groups. The Labour government withdrew the filing made by the Conservatives that the ICC prosecutor did not have jurisdiction. Khan submitted his reply to the submissions on 23rd of August, saying the case was of the utmost urgency and referred to the catastrophic situation in Gaza. He argued Palestine was a party to the ICC and any crimes committed on its territory were subject to ICC jurisdiction. In seeking the arrest warrant, Khan accused Gallant and Netanyahu of committing crimes against humanity as part of a widespread and systematic attack against the Palestinian civilian population pursuant to state policy. Khan carefully sought and won the backing of a large part of the UK human rights legal establishment at the time he called for Netanyahu's arrest, in particular to argue that the Israeli Prime Minister is answerable for crimes committed by Israel in Palestine. One group of 15 NGOs issued a statement expressing their deep disappointment that the UK had abstained in a UN General Assembly vote that called for the ruling in July of the other big international court, the International Court of Justice, to be enforced by Israel, leaving the occupied territories within 12 months. The resolution was passed on Wednesday at the Assembly by 124 votes to 14, but the UK was among 45 countries that abstained. The NGOs reminded the UK the ICJ ruling placed an obligation on all countries not to aid or assist the situation created by Israel's presence. Staying with the UK, and the scale of the challenge facing Rachel Reeves ahead of the autumn budget has been laid bare by a rise in the UK's national debt to the highest level since the 1960s and a collapse in consumer confidence. Figures from the Office for National Statistics, ONS, showed the government's outstanding debt pile reached 100% of gross domestic product in August, the highest level since 1961, as monthly borrowing rose by more than expected. According to the latest snapshot from the ONS, government borrowing, the difference between public sector spending and income, was £13.7 billion, an increase of £3.3 billion on the same month a year earlier, and the third highest August deficit since monthly records began in January 1993. The national debt, the sum total of every deficit, rose by 4.3 percentage points during the year to August to 100% of GDP, meaning an overall debt pile equal in size to the annual value of everything produced in the economy. The figures came amid growing pressure on the government to ease tax increases and spending cuts penciled in for the 30th of October budget, after Sir Keir Starmer told the public to expect painful decisions after finding what Labour called a £22 billion hole in the public finances. Reeves announced in August she would scrap winter fuel payments for most pensioners, shelve plans for social care reform, and axe road, rail and hospital investment as the first stage of a plan to reduce borrowing. However, concerns are growing within Labour ranks that the downbeat tone is damaging the government, while economists have warned that measures hitting consumer confidence would hurt growth and jobs. While official figures had put the debt ratio above 100% last year, the ONS said revisions meant this was the first time since 1961 that reading had equalled the size of the economy. And following on from that, consumer confidence in the UK has fallen sharply amid growing concerns over UK government plans for a, quote, painful budget, risking a hit to the economic recovery from the cost of living crisis. The latest barometer of sentiment from the data company GfK found consumer confidence fell to the lowest level since March, wiping out progress made this year to rebuild household morale. Neil Bellamy, the Consumer Insights Director at GfK, said the major correction in the outlook for personal finances had come despite a return to stable inflation earlier this year, lower borrowing costs, and resilient wage growth. Following the withdrawal of the winter fuel payments, and clear warnings of further difficult decisions to come on tax spending and welfare, consumers are nervously awaiting the budget decisions on 30th of October, he said. Sir Keir Starmer said last month that the new government would need to take painful decisions in the autumn budget after finding what Labour calls a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced in August she would scrap winter fuel payments for most pensioners, shelve plans for social care reform, and axe road, rail and hospital investment as the first stage of a plan to reduce borrowing. However, the latest snapshot suggests the downbeat tone and prospect of tax and welfare changes hitting personal finances has the potential to hit consumer spending recovery from the recession in the second half of last year. The figures show headline consumer confidence fell to -20, back to similar levels recorded earlier this year. The index measuring changes in personal finances over the past year was down 2 points at -9, while the outlook for the next 12 months was down 9 points at -3. The drop by 7 points from a reading of -13 in August marked the sharpest monthly decline in consumer confidence since April 2022. To Scotland now, and First Minister John Swinney has said the Scottish Government will focus on maximising investment from newly created UK Government energy initiatives, including Great British Energy, the National Wealth Fund and the Clean Power 2030 mission in projects in Scotland. The pledge came as the First Minister co-chaired his first meeting of the Scottish Energy Advisory Board, the key expert body which advises the Scottish Government on energy. The First Minister was joined by the Chair of Great British Energy, Jurgen Meyer, the Head of Clean Power 2030 Unit, Chris Stark, and representatives of Scotland's energy sector to plan the way ahead for Scotland. Speaking at the meeting, which was the first engagement event between the Scottish Government and Great British Energy, the First Minister said it is vital Scotland is seen as an attractive proposition for GB Energy and pledged his government support to make sure investment opportunities are secured. First Minister John Swinney said, "Clean, green energy represents a massive opportunity for Scotland. Not only does it help tackle climate change, but it can be a huge stimulus for jobs and prosperity for Scotland for decades to come. It is up to Scotland to maximise the investment and opportunities that will come to projects in Scotland." Having the heads of both Clean Power 2030 and Great British Energy in Scotland today meeting with the leaders of Scotland's energy sector is the next step in doing exactly that. It means we can make sure Scotland is ready to grab the chance for jobs and green growth they represent. It is a chance we will grasp with both hands. Scotland has already made great strides towards a clean, fair and secure energy system, and we're continuing to accelerate our enormous renewables potential and work to ensure the maximum possible economic and social benefit from the opportunities created. Workers' rights now, and trade union leaders will meet senior ministers on Saturday for crunch talks on the proposed workers' rights package as the UK government looks to head off a potentially damaging row at the Labour conference. General secretaries from the 11 unions affiliated to Labour will meet Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, and Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary, on the eve of conference to thrash out details of the package, according to reports. Just weeks before UK ministers are due to publish their proposals, several points of dispute are still outstanding, and ministers are hoping to avoid a damaging row with unions so soon into the new government. Labour had promised to come forward with its proposals in the first 100 days of government, leaving just a month to do so. Reports about the meeting's agenda said there were still a number of points of departure between the UK government and unions. Whitehall sources acknowledged there were still points of contention about the details of the bill. Labour had launched the idea of a package of stronger workers' rights while in opposition in 2021. However, since then, many unions feel the party has been trying to water them down under pressure from employers and the Treasury. One area of dispute has been over zero-hours contracts. Another point needing agreement is whether companies should be allowed to impose a probationary period before workers get their full rights, and if so, how long? Some unions want no probationary period at all, arguing that having one would undermine workers' rights to participate in collective bargaining agreements with their colleagues. UK ministers have been divided over the issue, with Rayner pushing for 3 months and Reynolds in the Treasury pushing for up to a year. A compromise position of 6 months is being proposed, but some union officials say this will still cause problems. Finally, the two sides are in dispute over whether to stop companies being able to fire and rehire workers. Ministers want companies to be allowed to put workers on lower pay if the alternative is to make them redundant, but the unions warn that the concession will be exploited by employers. Relations with the EU now, and fresh proposals to allow young people to move between the UK and the EU are set to be presented to the UK government within weeks, according to reports from Brussels. Reports say the first draft of a new version of Ursula von der Leyen's April proposal has already been discussed by member states and will be put to a working group in Brussels next week. Among possible changes could be the removal of four-year student exchange programs in which the students pay the home fees of the university they attend, something UK universities have said is not an option. If finalised next week, Member States will then instruct the European Commission to make a fresh offer to the UK. The previous Conservative government knocked back similar proposals earlier this year, but EU officials hope the new Labour government might reconsider the issue. They warned privately that another rejection would jeopardise Labour's hopes to sign new agreements on defence and agriculture. Some European diplomats say they are dismayed that Sir Keir Starmer has not already reversed the UK government's position on a youth mobility scheme, and it would be pointless to open more complex negotiations on defence or trade without agreeing this first. It has been pointed out that the UK has yet to make any proposals to Brussels for what it might want in any security or agricultural pact, and criticised the Prime Minister for ruling out more significant change, such as rejoining the customs union. One diplomat is reported to have said, "The red lines are almost like Theresa May's. It is difficult to see what has changed." In the United States, former Justice Department officials and legal scholars have warned that Donald Trump's sweeping threats, if he wins the presidency again, to name a special prosecutor to go after Joe Biden, take legal action against other foes, would subvert the rule of law in America and take the country towards authoritarianism. Trump's escalating legal threats have targeted, quote, corrupt election officials, lawyers, donors, and others he falsely deems were out to steal November's presidential election. They have popped up variously on his Truth Social platform, at campaign events, and at an elite police group he addressed this month in North Carolina. Trump's menacing pledges to essentially weaponize the Justice Department against opponents would mark a sharp break with the Department of Justice's mission statement, which cites as core values, quote, independence and impartiality. Ex-justice officials warn that Trump's barrage of intimidating verbal assaults are unprecedented and suggest he would undermine long-standing traditions of Justice Department independence if he wins the presidency, thus badly undermining the rule of law. Donald Trump is making many public threats to use the legal system to punish his enemies, which seems to be anyone who opposes him, said the former Deputy Attorney General Donald Eyre, who served in the George H.W. Bush administration. This conduct is utterly without precedent in campaign history, threatens all of our freedoms, and violates our basic rule of law. Critics note that Trump and top allies at the Conservative Heritage Foundation, which produced the far-right blueprint for a new Trump administration called Project 2025, have signalled plans to overhaul the Justice Department to give the President and loyalists more power in decisions about who to investigate and prosecute. Earlier this year, Trump was convicted on 34 counts of business fraud in New York for altering his company books to hide $130,000 in hush money payments to the adult film star Stormy Daniels, who had alleged an affair with Trump before he took office in 2016. Former prosecutors and some ex-Republican members of Congress warned Trump's barrage of legal threats was serious dangers of politicizing the Justice Department for his agenda of retribution. Staying in the United States, and Kamala Harris is set to speak in the Atlanta area today about Donald Trump's role in the abortion bans that now blanket much of the United States, days after news broke that two Georgia mothers died after being unable to access legal abortions and adequate medical care. In the weeks since becoming the Democratic nominee for president, Harris has made reproductive rights a central part of her campaign. She has toured the country to highlight the healthcare consequences of the 2022 overturning of Roe v. Wade, which paved the way for more than a dozen states to ban almost all abortions. The ex-president has been blamed for Roe v. Wade being overturned because he was responsible for the appointment of three new conservative Supreme Court justices. Harris's campaign has also criticized Republicans for repeatedly blocking Senate bills that would have guaranteed a federal right to in vitro fertilization fertility treatment, which has also been threatened by Roe being overturned. The deaths of the Georgia mothers, Amber Nicole Thurman and Candy Miller, were first reported earlier this week by ProPublica and occurred as a result of Georgia enacting the 6-week abortion ban. Georgia's Maternal Mortality Review Committee looked at both women's cases and deemed their deaths preventable. Although Georgia permits abortions in medical emergencies, doctors across the country have said that abortion exceptions are worded so vaguely as to be unworkable. Instead, doctors have said they are forced to watch until patients get sick enough to legally intervene. After Thurman took abortion pills to end a pregnancy in 2022, her body failed to expel all of the fetal tissue, a rare but potentially devastating complication. Doctors delayed giving the 28-year-old a routine procedure for 20 hours, and she developed sepsis. Her heart stopped during an emergency surgery. Kamala Harris said that the deaths were the consequences of Donald Trump's actions. Access to abortion has become one of voters' top issues over the last 2 years, and Democrats are hoping that outrage over Roe will propel them to victory at the ballot box this November. 10 states, including the key battleground states of Nevada and Arizona, are set to hold abortion-related ballot measures, which could boost turnout among the Democrats' base. Back to Scotland now. Faster broadband will feature in all new homes in Scotland from the 1st of January 2025, as legislation amending building standards will require developers to ensure all new build homes have the physical infrastructure as well as a gigabit-capable connection, subject to a £2,000 cost cap per dwelling. Where this is not possible, new builds should have the next fastest broadband connection within the cost cap. This fulfills a programme for government commitment and follows a consultation where it was welcomed by the majority of network operators and house builders. Business Minister Richard Lockhead said, "Connectivity is no longer a luxury, but an essential part of everyday life, enabling remote working, access to public services, education and health. That's why the Scottish Government is using its powers to reduce the barriers to accessing faster broadband so Scotland's people and businesses can make the most of the opportunities connectivity brings." That's it for tonight. My usual reminder that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Right now, we urgently need to increase our donations if we are to be able to pay our bills. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but our income is just over £2,500 a month, and we're now facing mounting debts. Please donate whatever you can afford. Thank you tonight for watching, and please join Broadcasting Scotland over the weekend with a live broadcast tomorrow and our usual weekly review on Sunday in the full Scottish. Goodbye, and thank you for watching. Good night.